Chapter 1. The Storm Begins. Maya stood at the kitchen window, cradling a warm cup of tea between her palms, watching the clouds churn like a restless ocean above the neighborhood. The scent of rain drifted through the open crack in the window, earthy, electric, foreboding. A storm was coming, not just in the sky, but in the silence that filled the house. She sighed and turned away from the window, her bare feet padding across the cool hardwood floor. The house was quiet, almost too quiet. Her husband, Aaron, was away on a corporate retreat in Chicago. Her son, Tyler, had left earlier that morning for a weekend camping trip with friends. Maya had the house to herself, something she rarely experienced. The space felt foreign without the hum of Tyler's music in his room, the clinking of Aaron's coffee cup in the morning. Alone, she was a stranger in her own home, surrounded by echoes and memories. She glanced at the clock. 6:18 p.m. The sky outside had dimmed to a moody gray, and fat raindrops began to tap gently against the windows. She poured herself a glass of red wine, needing something to warm the slow chill that had settled in her chest. Slipping into the living room, she curled up on the couch and flipped through the TV channels, landing on nothing in particular. Her thoughts drifted. At 40, Maya was still striking. Her chestnut hair framed her face in soft waves, and her eyes, though often tired, held the quiet fire of a woman who had once lived fiercely. She had once been passionate, artistic, full of light, but the years had dulled her edges. Marriage, motherhood, routine. She didn't regret her life, but she often wondered when she had stopped living it for herself. The sound of the doorbell snapped her from her thoughts. She blinked at the front door, confused. Who would be visiting in this weather? She wasn't expecting anyone. Setting her wine down, Maya padded to the door and opened it. And the wind surged inside, carrying a chill that raised goosebumps on her arms. And there he was. Aiden. Tall, rain-soaked, hair dripping into his eyes, his hands shoved into the pockets of a hoodie clinging damply to his frame. He looked up, and his face broke into a crooked grin. "Hey, Mrs. Keller. Didn't think anyone was home." Maya stared at him for a moment, surprised. "Aiden? What are you doing here?" "I was looking for Tyler. Thought maybe he skipped the trip last minute or something. Didn't know he was out of town." She stepped aside, the storm already blowing heavier behind him. "Well, come in, you'll catch pneumonia standing there." He stepped inside, leaving wet footprints across the tile. Maya closed the door behind him, and for a moment, the storm was muffled by the warmth of the house. The silence returned. Aiden was her son's closest friend. Smart, respectful, and charming in a way that made most mothers adore him. He'd been coming around for years, often crashing at their house on weekends. But this evening, soaked and breathless, something about him felt different. "You're drenched," she said, moving toward the hall. "Let me grab you a towel." "Thanks, I didn't mean to barge in like this." "It's fine. You're always welcome here," Maya replied over her shoulder. When she returned, he was standing in the middle of the living room, looking around like he hadn't seen it 1,000 times. But his eyes weren't just roaming the room. They lingered on her. Maya handed him the towel. "Here." Their fingers brushed, and something unspoken passed in that brief contact. Her breath caught, just for a second, before she forced herself to turn away. "You want something hot to drink?" she asked, heading back toward the kitchen. "Sure, tea would be great." She could feel his presence behind her as she moved around the kitchen, his eyes following her as if he was trying to memorize every movement. Maybe it was her imagination, or maybe she hadn't had anyone truly see her in so long that the sensation now felt foreign. "So," she said, placing the mug in front of him. "What's going on with you these days? College treating you well?" He shrugged, leaning against the counter, his arms crossed. "Yeah, mostly." I've been thinking about changing majors, though. Psychology's been messing with my head. She smiled. That sounds like college. Everyone gets lost for a while. Aiden's eyes narrowed slightly, the edge of a smirk on his lips. And you? You ever get lost? Maya blinked. The question was unexpected, personal. She let out a soft laugh to diffuse the tension. Only every other day. Their eyes locked. The silence stretched, and then the first thunder cracked through the sky like a warning. Aiden looked out the window. Looks like I'm stuck here for a while. Maya nodded slowly. Yeah, looks that way. Outside, the storm howled louder. Inside, something else had begun to stir. Chapter 2. Familiar Stranger. The storm had no plans of letting up. Rain hammered against the windows like impatient knuckles, and the occasional flash of lightning illuminated the corners of the room in stark white before darkness swallowed it again. Maya had lit a couple of candles for the sake of comfort, but their warm glow only made the living room feel smaller, more intimate. Aiden had taken off his damp hoodie and laid it across the arm of the couch. Now he sat in a clean t-shirt and jeans that were still clinging slightly to his legs, the fabric dark with water. His damp hair curled slightly at the edges, giving him a tousled look that made Maya's heart stutter in a way that caught her off guard. She watched him from the kitchen doorway as he sipped his tea, one hand resting along the back of the couch, his body relaxed, like he belonged there, like this wasn't strange at all. But it was strange. So very strange. You okay over there? He asked, his voice breaking the spell. Maya blinked. Yeah. Just thinking. About, he hesitated, about how fast time goes. You boys used to run through this house like wild things. Now you're, well, men. Aiden smiled softly. I still remember the first time I came here. Tyler made me eat those disgusting frozen burritos your husband hoards in the basement freezer. Maya laughed, grateful for the distraction. Yes. Aaron and his emergency food stash. He thinks we're going to live through an apocalypse eating mystery meat. Aiden leaned forward, his gaze steady. You were always different than I expected. I remember thinking that. Maya tilted her head, cautious. Different how? You weren't like other moms. You were always present, cool, but also quiet. Like there was something you weren't saying, but it was always there, just under the surface. She wasn't sure how to respond. No one had ever seen that in her, not even Aaron. That quiet longing, that ache for something she couldn't even name. Aiden's eyes were on her again, intense, thoughtful. Do you ever feel invisible? The question hit her like a soft punch to the gut. All the time, she admitted before she could stop herself. He nodded slowly, like he understood too well. You shouldn't, he said. You're not. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was thick, weighty, full of something unnamed, something unspoken. The fire crackled in the fireplace, and Maya realized she was gripping the edge of the kitchen counter too tightly. I think you should change out of those wet jeans, she said suddenly, needing to shift the energy. I can grab you something of Tyler's. Aiden didn't move. His eyes held hers. You sure you don't mind me staying a bit? No, of course not, she replied, too quickly. He stood up, tall and close, and the space between them seemed to vanish in the blink of an eye. Thanks for letting me crash. You always made me feel welcome here. Maya stepped back slightly, creating distance she wasn't sure she wanted. I'll go get those clothes. She made her way upstairs, trying not to think about how her heart was beating faster than usual, or how her palms felt hot despite the chill of the house. It was just Aiden, her son's best friend. This was innocent, wasn't it? She found a pair of sweats and a dry t-shirt in Tyler's room and brought them back down, handing them off without meeting Aiden's eyes. He took them with a quiet, "Thanks," and disappeared into the downstairs bathroom. Maya let out a slow breath, trying to steady herself. This wasn't a romance novel. This was real life. She was a married woman, and he was... The door opened again, and when Aiden stepped out, Maya froze. He looked different. Not just dry, but confident. His damp curls still clung to his forehead, and the borrowed shirt stretched just a bit across his chest. His eyes found hers, and something lingered there. Something unspoken and undeniably male. "Feel better?" she asked, her voice lower than she intended. He nodded, walking back toward the couch. He sat, but this time he didn't recline. He watched her, studied her, and Maya could feel his gaze crawling over her skin like static. She turned away and picked up her wine again, needing something, anything, to distract her. "I always liked this house," he said softly, "but it wasn't the place. It was how I felt when I was here." Maya glanced at him. "And how was that?" He didn't answer right away. His eyes dropped briefly to her lips, then back up. "Safe. Seen." Her pulse tripped. Thunder cracked again. And in that dim light, with the storm screaming at the windows, she realized something she hadn't allowed herself to admit until that moment. She wasn't just seeing Aiden. She was noticing him. And worse, he was noticing her too. Chapter 3. Under the Same Roof. Maya hadn't meant to offer him dinner. It had slipped out between sips of wine and strained silences, and Aiden had accepted without hesitation. Now they sat across from each other at the kitchen island, the storm outside wrapping the house in a cocoon of rain and thunder. The overhead lights cast a soft golden hue across the countertop, making the moment feel more intimate than it had any right to. Maya stirred the pot of soup she'd thrown together without thinking. Chicken, garlic, wild rice. Comfort food. She needed something grounding, something normal. And yet, there was nothing normal about the way Aiden kept watching her. He wasn't being overt. If anything, his glances were too careful, too deliberate, but there was no mistaking it. He was seeing her not as a mother figure, not as an adult to be respected, but as a woman. And Maya wasn't sure what unnerved her more, the impropriety of it, or the fact that it made her feel alive. She handed him a bowl and sat across from him, the island a fragile barrier between two worlds. "This is good," Aiden said after the first bite. "Like, really good. You always cook like this?" Maya laughed lightly. "Only when I'm trying to impress someone." The words slipped out before she could stop them, and her eyes flew up to meet his. Aiden raised an eyebrow, a slow smile spreading across his lips. "Am I someone?" She should have said no, should have brushed it off. Instead, she smiled softly and took a sip of her wine. The conversation flowed more easily after that. They talked about Tyler, college, books, movies. Aiden was more thoughtful than she remembered, wiser. And beneath his charm there was a layer of something else, something deeper. He wasn't just flirting for fun. He was studying her, measuring every reaction, every smile, every pause. "You ever think about going back to painting?" he asked, as they cleared the dishes together. Maya glanced at him, surprised. "You remember that?" "Yeah." "You had your art stuff in the den. I used to sneak in there when you weren't home. Your paintings were wild. Beautiful, but dark." She was quiet for a beat. "I haven't touched a brush in years." "Will not?" She hesitated, drying her hands slowly, because, somewhere along the way, life became more about making others comfortable than expressing myself. Aiden didn't reply immediately. When he did, his voice was low. "You should stop doing that." Maya turned to him, their eyes locking again across the kitchen. "Stop doing what?" "Dimming yourself for people who stopped seeing you." Her breath caught. He stepped closer, just one step, but it felt seismic. "You don't even realize, do you?" he murmured. "How magnetic you are when you're just being real." Maya swallowed hard. "You're just being kind." He tilted his head, his voice lowering to a near whisper. "No, I'm being honest." Thunder cracked again, louder this time. Maya flinched, the storm suddenly feeling like it was inside her, pulsing through her veins. "I should make up the guest room," she said, her voice thin, brittle. "You don't have to, couch is fine." She nodded and turned away, but Aiden's hand caught her wrist gently, not possessive, just grounding. Maya. It was the first time he'd ever said her name like that. Soft, reverent, intimate. She turned back to face him, her breath hitching as she realized how close he now stood. His hand dropped from her wrist, slowly, but the heat of his touch lingered on her skin. "I know this is probably the worst idea either of us could have," he said, his tone cautious but unflinching. "But I'm not going to pretend I don't see you, and I don't think you should keep pretending you don't feel it." She was frozen, every nerve alive, every instinct torn between flight and surrender. "Maya, say something," he whispered. But she couldn't, because every word she wanted to say would unravel her. And maybe she wanted to be unraveled. The air was too thick. She turned away again, heart pounding, and reached for a folded blanket from the closet. "The couch is yours," she said quietly, placing it in his hands without meeting his eyes. "Good night, Aiden." He didn't stop her, didn't touch her again. But as she climbed the stairs, she could feel his gaze on her back, warm and persistent, like the memory of a dream she wasn't ready to wake from. And long after she slid beneath the sheets and closed her eyes, that feeling remained, haunting her, tempting her, pulling her towards something she wasn't sure she had the strength to resist. Chapter 4. The Touch of Temptation. Maya woke before dawn. Her bedroom was bathed in pale gray light, the storm outside finally retreating into a restless silence. Raindrops clung to the window panes like tears, and the air was damp and heavy with something unspoken. She lay there in bed, listening to the hush of the house. Every creak of the floorboards below made her heart twitch. Aiden was still here. And so was that feeling, that breathless anticipation hanging in the quiet, as if the entire house remembered the moment they'd shared last night in the kitchen. The way he had looked at her, the way her name had sounded in his voice, the weight of his touch lingering on her wrist. She rolled over and stared at the ceiling. What was happening to her? She was a mother, a wife. She had a life that had been stitched together by years of careful choices and silent compromises. But one stormy night, one glance, one conversation had ripped open something wild and buried in her, and she couldn't ignore it anymore. By the time she descended the stairs, the scent of coffee was already drifting through the air. Aiden. He was in the kitchen, barefoot, hair still tousled, wearing the same borrowed clothes from last night. The t-shirt clung to his chest in a way that made Maya avert her eyes. Too much. He turned as she stepped into the room, his eyes immediately locking onto hers. "Morning," he said softly, holding out a steaming mug. "You made coffee?" she asked, voice still sleep-rough. "I remember you always had the French press stashed behind the cereal. Thought I'd surprise you." She took the mug from him, brushing his fingers again. It wasn't accidental. It didn't feel innocent anymore. He watched her as she took a sip, her hands trembling slightly around the ceramic. His gaze didn't roam, it focused steadily, patiently, on her face, her mouth, her eyes. Like he was searching for permission in the lines of her expression. "I didn't sleep much," he said finally. "Me neither." She turned toward the window, not ready to face what was rising between them. The storm was loud. "It's not why I couldn't sleep." Her breath hitched. She didn't move. Behind her, she could feel him stepping closer. Just one step, then two. She felt the heat of his body before he even touched her. And then he did. A hand, gentle and uncertain, landed on her bare shoulder. The contact was feather light, but it sent a shiver down her spine. She didn't pull away. "Maya." His voice was a whisper, a confession. Still, she stood still. "I know this crosses lines. I know I shouldn't be thinking about you the way I do," he said quietly, his fingers tracing the curve of her arm now, barely touching, like she was made of porcelain. "But ever since I was old enough to notice the world, I noticed you." She turned then, slowly, and looked up into his eyes. They were open, earnest, burning with something deeper than a crush, something older than a fling, and it terrified her. "I don't know what to do with this," she whispered. "You don't have to do anything," Aiden said, stepping even closer. "Just let yourself feel it." His hand cupped her cheek gently, brushing her skin with the back of his fingers. Maya closed her eyes, her breath trembling between her lips. "I can't," she began. But he didn't kiss her. He didn't push. He just stayed there, close enough to make her ache, but far enough to let her choose. And maybe that's what made it impossible to walk away. When her eyes opened again, they were glassy with indecision. Her lips parted in surrender and fear. Her hand reached up, not to stop him, but to anchor herself. She pressed her palm lightly to his chest, feeling the strong, steady thrum of his heartbeat beneath her touch. And that's when she knew this wasn't just physical. It was personal. Too personal. Too real. She pulled back slightly, her breath shaky. "I need air," she whispered, already moving toward the back door. Aiden didn't follow. Not right away. She stepped outside, barefoot, the patio wet beneath her feet, the dawn light filtering through the trees. Her heart was pounding, her body felt wired, her skin still buzzed where he had touched her. Inside she heard the soft creak of the door opening behind her. He stepped out silently, shirtless now, holding the cup she'd left behind. He said nothing, and yet the weight of him there, the nearness of him, said everything. They stood in silence, side by side, as the sun broke through the clouds for the first time in days. This wasn't just temptation anymore. This was a question neither of them knew how to answer. And the more they hesitated, the closer they crept toward the edge of something they'd never come back from. Chapter 5. One line crossed. The house was too quiet, too still. As Maya stepped back inside, her damp feet leaving faint prints on the hardwood floor, she felt the silence press in around her. Aiden had followed her in, but neither of them spoke. The space between them was thick with everything they hadn't said, and everything they had felt. Maya hovered near the doorway, one hand clutching the frame, as though bracing herself against something inevitable. Aiden stood across the room, his shirt now casually slung over his shoulder, his chest rising and falling with slow, controlled breaths. But his eyes, those deep, searching eyes, never left hers. "I should ask you to leave," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "You should," he agreed softly. She looked up sharply, surprised by the calm in his voice. "But you won't," he added. Maya swallowed hard. Why not? Because you don't want to. He crossed the floor slowly, deliberately, as if approaching a skittish animal. Maya didn't move. Her pulse roared in her ears as he came to a stop in front of her, his hand lifting to her face again. Tentative, reverent. His thumb traced the edge of her jaw, and she leaned into the touch without realizing. You keep pretending this is wrong, he murmured, but tell me, does it feel wrong? Her eyes fluttered closed. It doesn't feel wrong. It feels dangerous. Some things are worth the risk. She didn't respond, couldn't. And then he kissed her. Softly at first, an exploration, not a conquest. His lips moved with caution, not greed, tasting her like a secret he'd waited years to know. Maya froze, the flood of sensation short-circuiting every ounce of resistance. His hands cupped her face as the kiss deepened, and when her body melted against his, something inside her cracked open. A quiet moan escaped her throat. She wasn't thinking anymore. She was feeling. The years of quiet sacrifice, of being unseen, unloved, untouched. They all collapsed beneath the heat of Aiden's mouth. His kisses trailed down her neck, slow and reverent, like she was something sacred. I shouldn't be doing this, she breathed against his lips. But you are, he said, voice thick with emotion. And it was true. Her hands found his shoulders, fingers digging into muscle, grounding herself in his reality. His skin was warm beneath her touch, his chest solid, his scent intoxicating. A mixture of rain, skin, and something that belonged only to him. Aiden swept her into his arms with unexpected tenderness, carrying her from the hallway to the couch. She didn't resist, couldn't. Her breath caught as he laid her down, covering her body with his in a way that felt both protective and primal. Every brush of skin was fire. Every kiss was a promise. She traced his back with her fingers, memorizing the curve of him. His hands explored with reverence. No rush, no pressure, just discovery. He kissed the hollow of her throat, the edge of her shoulder, the curve of her collarbone. Her sweater slipped from her frame, followed by hesitation that vanished under his touch. You're beautiful, he whispered, hovering just above her lips. Do you know that? Maya blinked up at him, heart hammering. Not until now? He smiled, a quiet ache in his eyes, and kissed her again, deeper this time. The dam had broken. Their bodies moved together with growing urgency, fueled by years of denial and hours of silence finally giving way. Clothes fell away like secrets, soft and slow. The couch, once a boundary, now bore witness to something that felt like both sin and salvation. They tangled together, gasps and moans laced through each movement, hands, lips, teeth, skin. He worshipped her like no one ever had, and Maya gave herself to him completely. When they collapsed into each other afterward, breathless and spent, the silence was no longer empty. It was full, overflowing with everything that had just happened, and Aiden's hand slid into hers, fingers entwining naturally. No words were spoken, there weren't any left. But Maya knew, deep in her bones, that the line had been crossed, and nothing would ever be the same again. Chapter 6. After the Fire. Maya awoke to stillness. No thunder, no wind, just the slow creak of the house settling around her, and the rhythmic rise and fall of breath beside her. Aiden. He was still here. His arm lay draped over her waist, his chest warm against her back, and for a moment she let herself sink into the comfort of it. Of him. His scent was in her skin, his touch a memory branded into her body. Her fingers curled around the edge of the blanket pulled up over them both, and she tried to still the storm now raging inside her. But the storm was no longer outside. It was in her. Reality crept in through the cracks, like daylight slipping under the door. What had she done? Her breath caught in her throat as she turned gently, careful not to wake him. Aiden lay on his side, lips parted, his lashes long against his cheek, looking heartbreakingly young and peaceful. The boy who used to eat cereal in her kitchen. The boy who used to call her Mrs. Lawson. And now, she sat up slowly, pulling the blanket around her as if it could shield her from the weight of the moment. The clock on the wall read 7:12. IMEM. Outside, the sun had finally returned, casting pale light across the living room. The storm had passed, but it had left something broken behind. Maya rose from the couch and crossed the room like a ghost, her mind a blur of emotions, guilt, awe, desire, fear. She wrapped herself in a robe and moved to the kitchen, fingers trembling as she reached for the kettle. She hadn't thought about Tyler. Not last night, not once. And that cut deepest of all. Behind her, she heard soft footsteps. Aiden stood in the doorway, shirtless, sleep in his eyes but fully awake in every other way. His gaze found hers instantly. "Hey," he said, voice husky. "Hi," she replied, too quickly, too sharp. He stepped forward, cautiously. "Are you okay?" Maya didn't answer right away. She turned back to the kettle, watching it fill with water. "I don't know what I am." A pause. Then, quietly, "Do you regret it?" Her shoulders tensed. That was the question, wasn't it? She turned slowly to face him, her robe clutched tightly around her body. I don't regret you, but I regret what this means." "What does it mean?" She blinked. "That we crossed a line, that nothing goes back to how it was, that we lied, not just to ourselves, but to the world that trusted us not to do this." Aiden stepped closer. "I don't see it as a lie. You wouldn't. You're not the one with a life waiting to crumble under this. That life already wasn't enough for you," he said softly. "You said it yourself." Maya's throat tightened. "That doesn't mean I was looking for this." "But you didn't stop it." The silence that followed was so sharp it felt like it could cut skin. She looked at him, really looked. At the boy who had become a man in front of her. The man who had touched her like she was art. Who had seen her like no one else in years. And yet, all she could feel now was the echo of choices made in the dark. "I need space," she said quietly. Aiden's expression didn't shift, but something in his eyes dimmed. "Okay." She nodded once and turned away, retreating upstairs like the air had become too thin. She closed the bedroom door behind her and pressed her back against it, chest heaving. For the first time in a long time, she didn't know who she was, or what she wanted. Downstairs, the sound of the front door opening and closing reached her ears. He was gone, and all that remained was silence, and a fire still smoldering in her chest. Chapter 7. Echoes Between Us. 3 weeks passed. 3 weeks of polite avoidance, of carefully constructed silences and unanswered messages. Aiden hadn't come back. Not to visit Tyler, not to retrieve the sweater he'd left folded on the back of Maya's couch, not even to check in with the woman who had given him everything and then vanished into herself. Maya had resumed her life, or at least the illusion of it. Her routine returned, sterile and automatic. Work, errands, cold dinners eaten in front of the television. She moved through her home like a ghost, avoiding the couch they'd shared, the robe she'd worn, the memory of his touch. But nothing really returned to normal. because she hadn't. Every time she stood in front of the mirror, she remembered the way he'd looked at her. Every time she touched the banister, she remembered the brush of his fingers against hers. Every time she lay awake at night, she could still hear his voice, soft and breaking. "Do you regret it?" And no matter how many times she tried to answer that question, her heart refused to whisper yes. But it had to end, didn't it? Then came the knock. Soft, hesitant, a quiet plea on wood. It was nearly 9 p.m. The sky outside had turned a deep velvet blue, stars barely breaking through the clouded sky. Maya paused mid-step in the hallway, heart lurching into her throat. She already knew, before she opened the door, before she even peeked through the glass, she knew. Aiden. He stood there with his hands in the pockets of his coat, rain dripping from his dark hair. His eyes met hers instantly. No pretense, no smile, just honesty. That same brutal, beautiful honesty that had always undone her. "I shouldn't be here," he said softly. "But you are." Maya opened the door wider and stepped aside. He entered with careful steps, like he didn't trust the floor not to collapse beneath them. She watched as he paused in the living room, glancing around the place where it had all happened. Nothing had changed. Everything had. "I've been trying to stay away," he said finally. "I noticed. But I can't stop thinking about you." Maya's breath caught. He turned toward her then, eyes dark and steady. "I don't want to make this harder for you. I don't want to ruin your life. But pretending we can go back, it's killing me." She didn't know what to say. Her voice failed her, but her silence spoke volumes. "I think about you every damn day," he went on, "not just that night, but everything. Your laugh, the way you stir your tea, the way you looked at me like I wasn't just a boy playing at being a man." Maya stepped closer. "Do you think I don't think about you?" she asked, voice breaking. "Do you think I haven't questioned every decision, every second, every touch?" "Then say it," he said. "Say it meant something." She looked up at him, her defenses cracked, her eyes wet. It meant everything. The words slipped out before she could stop them. And that was it. He was in front of her again, close enough to feel, close enough to remember. But he didn't touch her, not yet. Not until she reached for him first. Just the edge of his sleeve, her fingers curling in the fabric like an anchor. Aiden closed the distance, hands sliding to her waist, forehead resting against hers. "I'm not asking for forever," he whispered, "just a chance." Maya's hand slid to his chest. She could feel his heart racing, wild and alive beneath her palm. Hers matched it, beat for beat. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "Then we learn together." Their lips met again, not rushed this time, not frantic. It was a kiss made of slow confessions and promises too scared to be spoken aloud. A kiss that said, "I still want you. I never stopped." And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. For now. Because even if the world outside didn't understand, even if their time was fragile, the echo between them was too loud to ignore. Chapter 8, When the World Finds Out. It started with a glance. Tyler's. He arrived 2 days later, unexpectedly, with an overnight bag slung over his shoulder and the same lopsided grin Maya had seen since he was a teenager. But this time, that grin faltered when he stepped into the living room and saw her freeze. And behind her, Aiden's coffee mug still sat on the kitchen counter. Unwashed. "Hey," Tyler said slowly, eyes narrowing. "Is someone here?" "No," Maya replied too fast, too tight. Tyler raised an eyebrow. "You sure?" "Thought I saw a car parked out front." Maya's mouth went dry. "Just a neighbor's." He stared at her for a beat too long, the air suddenly tight with something unsaid. She knew her son, knew the way he picked up on shifts, the way his mind worked faster than he let on. He didn't push it then, but something had already changed. By the next morning, the whispers had begun. A text from a neighbor. "Is everything okay? Saw Aiden coming out of your place yesterday. Late." A message from her coworker at the clinic. "That boy you were with, your son's friend? Everything all right, Maya?" And worst of all, Tyler's silence. He left early. No explanations. No hug. No smile. Just a door closed harder than it needed to be. Maya sat on her couch for hours afterward, her phone in her hand, heart in her throat. Guilt sat heavy on her shoulders. She had tried to keep this world small, private, but secrets, she was learning, didn't stay buried for long. Aiden came by that evening. She opened the door before he even knocked. "You told someone?" he asked, voice low, not accusing, just bracing. She shook her head. "No, but they know, or they think they know." He stepped inside, eyes scanning her face. "Tyler? I think so." Silence stretched between them like glass. Maya collapsed onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. "God, what have we done?" Aiden sat beside her, not touching, not pushing, just there. "We told the truth with our bodies. That's not a crime." "It might as well be," she whispered. "I'm his mother, you're his friend. What do we even call this?" "We call it ours." His words wrapped around her like a lifeline. But Maya wasn't sure she could hold on. The next few days blurred into anxiety. Texts went unanswered. Friends became distant. She heard her name whispered in hallways, saw the flicker of judgment in eyes that once looked at her with respect. Even the receptionist at her office had begun using a different tone. But the real test came Friday. Tyler showed up at her doorstep. Maya opened the door with trembling hands. He stood there in the fading light, arms crossed, jaw tight. "Is it true?" he asked. If she didn't lie. She couldn't. "Yeah." Tyler stared at her, face unreadable. "You slept with Aiden?" Her breath hitched. "It wasn't just." "I trusted you," he cut in, voice sharp. "He's my best friend, Mom. What the hell were you thinking?" Maya swallowed. I didn't plan this. I didn't look for it. It happened. And it meant something." Tyler stepped back, like the words themselves stung. "You're not who I thought you were." And then he turned. Walked away. Maya stood frozen in the doorway long after he was gone. Later that night, Aiden held her close while she cried into his chest. "Hates me," she whispered. "He doesn't," Aiden murmured. "He's hurt, but he'll come around." "How do you know?" "Because he knows you, and deep down, he knows love isn't always neat, or fair, or easy." She didn't answer, just clung tighter. Outside, the wind picked up again. But this time, the storm wasn't in the sky. It was in the fallout of being seen, for real. Chapter 9. The Choice. It had been 5 days since Tyler walked away. 5 days since Maya had heard her son's voice. 5 days of silence, of distance, of reflection. The town had grown quieter, too, but not in the comforting way. Conversations now trailed off when she entered a room. Friends she'd known for years suddenly seemed unsure of what to say, how to act. Their eyes held curiosity wrapped in judgment, pity coated in politeness. Maya had never been the type to care about gossip. But this wasn't just idle talk. This was her family, her future, her heart. Aiden hadn't left her side, not really. He gave her space when she needed it, slept on the couch without asking, cooked breakfast in her kitchen like it was the most natural thing in the world. He asked nothing from her. But in the soft glances and unspoken support, Maya could feel the weight of everything he wanted. Her completely, openly, without shame. And she was terrified. That morning, she sat alone on the back porch, a cup of tea cooling in her hands, the autumn air crisp against her skin. The trees were beginning to turn, burnt gold and deep red painting the horizon, beautiful and fleeting. Behind her, the door creaked open. Aiden stepped out, hands in his pockets, eyes studying her the way he always did, as if she were the center of his world and he couldn't quite believe she was real. "You okay?" he asked gently. She looked at him for a long moment. "I want to be," she said. He nodded, coming closer. "You don't have to decide anything today." Maya smiled sadly. "That's the thing I already have." Aiden froze. "I spent my life trying to be what everyone else expected. The perfect mother, the dependable friend, the woman who always did the right thing, even when it left her empty." She set her mug down and stood. "But you made me feel alive again. You saw me." He took a tentative step forward. "So, what are you saying?" "I'm saying I choose you," Maya said. Her voice didn't waver. "But I have to choose me too." Aiden blinked. "I don't understand." She reached up and touched his face, her thumb brushing his cheek. "I love you," she said softly, "and I'm not going to hide that anymore. But I can't build something new on a cracked foundation. I need to talk to Tyler. Not to apologize for loving you, but to face him honestly, the way I should have from the beginning." Aiden's expression shifted. Relief and uncertainty at once. "I can wait," he said. "As long as it takes." Maya smiled. "Then let's stop waiting." That afternoon she drove to Tyler's apartment. She waited outside, hands trembling around the steering wheel, heart thudding against her ribs. When the door finally opened, Tyler stared at her for a long, guarded moment. But he stepped aside. She walked in. No words came easily, but truth didn't need polish. It only needed courage. "I didn't come here to beg," Maya said. "I came to explain. I never meant to betray you, Tyler. I never planned for any of this, but I won't pretend it didn't mean something. I love him. I think I've loved him for longer than I admitted to myself." Tyler crossed his arms, silent. She took a breath. "You don't have to accept it, but I hope one day you might understand it." He sat on the edge of the armrest, staring at the floor. "He should have told me. We both should have." Tyler looked up at her, eyes softer now, pain still lingering in the corners. "He's a good guy," he said quietly. "And you deserve to be happy, Mom, even if I'm still pissed about how it happened." Maya's heart cracked open with relief. "I'm not asking you to be okay with it now," she said. "I'm just asking you not to shut me out." He nodded after a beat. "I'm trying." That was enough. 3 weeks later, Aiden met her at the edge of the woods, under the same sky that had once raged above them. This time, it was calm. She wore no mask, he brought no caution. They simply stood together, hand in hand. No longer hiding. No longer afraid. The world might never understand. But for once, they did. And that was all they needed. The end.